All right, guys, guess I'm going to have to start this class with no students joining. So today's theme is actually demonstratives and distributives. And when we look at demonstratives and distributives, there are essentially two major categories. These are the two main categories of, of pronouns that we can use to replace nouns. So the first demonstrative pronoun type is when it comes to, for example, near versus far. If we have something that's near us, we can use the demonstrative pronoun this for a singular object. And if it's something that's far away, then we can use the demonstrative object that, right? So this is when we have a demonstrative pronoun whose identity is defined to be singular. Singular as well as the distance, whether or not it's near or far from the speaker. So if something is near you, you can say, for example, this is my phone. This is my computer. This is my notebook, right? So those are all examples of demonstrative pronouns replacing nouns that are near, that are singular, as well as near you in proximity to your present position. And when we have a plural situation, instead of saying this, we say these. So, for example, these post-it notes, right? These pens, right? These are all examples of using demonstrative pronouns in this sense, in the plural sense, as well as near something, near you, near another person, depending on the actual context of the situation. So what about if something's far away? So if something's far away, then we would actually have to use different demonstrative pronouns. We would use that and those, right? So for singular, it would be that, right? That computer is his. That car is ours, right? For something that's plural, those houses are ginormous, or those houses are huge, right? So you're using, instead of saying those houses are big houses, or those are, those houses are big houses, you're replacing the noun houses, and you're just using the pronoun those, right? Those houses are big. Those houses are luxurious, right? Whatever the case may be. So this is the importance of a demonstrative pronoun. It describes the noun's identity, whether or not it's near or far away in this case, and whether or not it's singular or plural. And the interesting thing about demonstrative pronouns, for example, this, these, that, those, the interesting thing is they can also be used as adjectives. In this case, we call them demonstrative adjectives, right? They're identical to their forms as demonstrative pronouns, right? Nothing changes. So when we talked about the demonstrative pronouns, they are also this, that, these, those. Same thing with the demonstrative adjectives, except in this case, we are using them in the form of describing a noun instead of replacing the noun's identity, right? So you can say, for example, let's say you're about to taste something that you have never tried before, and then after you taste it, you really like it. You can say, wow, that tasted really good, right? You can say, this dish looks delicious, right? So we're talking about using these same pronouns as adjectives this time. So when we say that tasted delicious, that is taking the place of whatever food item you had, and you're using the adjective good or delicious to describe the actual pronoun, to describe what you're talking about in this case, right? So in this case, for example, that tasted delicious, that is replacing the dish that you had or whatever food you had, and delicious is the adjective that is describing it, right? So what's the main difference? The actual pronouns are the same, right? This, these, that, those. But a demonstrative pronoun stands alone, right? So we can say, that is a rose. That tasted amazing, right? These are all demonstrative pronouns. If we have a demonstrative adjective, it has to always be accompanied with a noun itself, right? The noun that it's describing. That book is informative, right? This car is spacious. That house is, luxurious, right? So it's a little bit of a challenge initially when you try to look at the differences between pronouns and adjectives. However, once you make that understanding, once you reach that understanding, I should say, it's easy to compare the two. The first example with a demonstrative pronoun, replacing a noun. Noun is no longer there, right? Instead of saying this flower is a rose, this is a rose, right? That is a daisy, right? These are big homes, right? Not these homes are big homes. No, these are big homes. Homes is being replaced. And, those are large cars. And when you have a demonstrative pronoun as an adjective, you do have to have the noun, right? So that house is massive, something like that. Hey, Sergio, how's it going? Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
How's it going?
Fine, thank you. And you?
Good, good, doing well. Thanks for joining class, actually. I think this is a very slow time. I didn't have any students in the class initially.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
No worries. So, where are you from, Sergio?
I'm from Mexico.
From Mexico. Bienvenido.
Gracias.
I only speak a little bit of this introductory Spanish, but so let us do this then, Sergio. Let me start with the lesson, if you don't mind. We're gonna be looking at demonstrative adjectives and demonstrative pronouns today. So when we talk about a demonstrative pronoun, right, it is a pronoun that replaces a noun. Okay. So the examples we have in English include, for example, this, that, right? These, those, right? These are pronouns that we use in English, and we have two main ways of understanding which ones that we want to use. Which ones do we want to use? So if something is singular, then we would use this, or we can use that, right? So for example, that computer, this notebook, right? So when we say that, however, it's singular, but it's far away from us, right? So in Spanish, you would say like aquella computadora, right? Instead of something like esta computadora. So this and that is kind of the differentiation between those two pronouns. If something is near you and you're only talking about one thing, you use this. If something is far away and it's still only one thing, you use that, right? So when we use pronouns, demonstrative pronouns in this sense, the demonstrative pronoun always replaces the noun in the sentence, right? We don't use a noun in the sentence because we already have the pronoun that is taking its place. So one example of that, for example, if we use this, right? This is a rose. Maybe you're in a garden, you're walking around, right? This is a rose. You're not saying this flower is a rose, right? The noun flower is replaced by the pronoun this, right? This is a rose. That is a house, right? That is a car. So those are all examples of demonstrative pronouns in the singular form. Depending on if something is near you, this, and far away would be that, right? So, Sergio, any questions about that initially?
Well, no, it seems clear.
It seems clear.
Up to now, it seems clear.
Sure. Would you mind giving me a sentence, Sergio, using either this or that in a sentence? Please.
Yeah. Be careful. That is my dog.
Be careful. That is my dog, right? Fantastic. Fantastic. Great job. You're using that to replace the noun. Instead of saying, for example, that dog is my dog, you're saying that is my dog, right? Very well done. Heidi, how's it going? Welcome to class.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Yep, nice to see you as well. So Heidi, we're actually talking about demonstrative pronouns, and we just went over the difference between this and that, right? So if something is near you and it's a singular, then we can use, and it's a single item, then we can use this, right? If something is far away and it's singular, what do we use?
That.
Fantastic. Can you give us an example using either this or that?
That is their house.
That is their house, right? Fantastic. So when we look at demonstrative pronouns now, we looked at the first category, which was singular, near versus far. We can also look at demonstrative pronouns as plural pronouns, right? If they're replacing plural nouns. So for
these and those.
exactly, right? It'd be these and those. So Sergio, how would you make a sentence using these or those?
These flowers are for my girlfriend.
These flowers are for my girlfriend works really well, right? However, you want to use the pronoun to replace the noun. So would you want to say flowers in that case?
No.
So
So
how would we say it?
I don't know.
No, you can very simply say these are for my girlfriend, right?
Okay.
You could say it that way because then what's really nice about that is at that point you are omitting the actual noun that is there, right? Because the pronoun, the demonstrative pronoun, these, those, this, that, they replace the noun. So we don't need to talk about the noun in the actual sentence, right? But that's really good. I really like that. Heidi, would you be able to give me an example?
Those are their children.
Those are their children, right? Fantastic. So those, we don't have to say those children are their children. You understand from the context of the sentence that you're talking about kids or something like that, right? Um, I wanted to welcome the first class, the other person. Hey, Yusuf, how's it going? Yusuf, do you hear me? Okay, we actually maybe. Well, let me move on, guys. Unfortunately, we can't hear Yusuf. The other aspect of demonstrative pronouns is, so we looked at the first case in which the demonstrative pronoun replaces a noun, right? The second way that we can use them is if they are, we can use them as adjectives actually, right? So it's the same form. The word is the same. This, that, these, or those. However, the adjective in this case qualifies a noun, so we need to include the noun in the sentence, right? So before we could say, for example, those are their children, right? Now, how would we use a demonstrative pronoun in the form of an adjective to maybe talk about something similar?
Those children are Japanese.
Those children are Japanese, right? So we are describing the children using the adjective Japanese, and the demonstrative pronoun needs the noun, right? Or I'm sorry, those is the demonstrative adjective describing the children in this case, right? So those children are Japanese, right? Does that make sense, Sergio? So, for example, when we use a demonstrative adjective, the pronoun has to stand with a noun, right? But when it's just a demonstrative pronoun, there's no noun in the sentence. So what you said before will actually work in this example, right? So when you were talking about the flowers, right? So demonstrative adjective, we are using a pronoun as well as the noun, right? So we have the pronoun and then the noun. So what was that example you told us earlier, Sergio? You can change it if you want.
So those flowers are for my girlfriend. So just to be clear, so we
Yeah,
have two different kinds of. We have demonstrative. How do you say demonstrative pronoun?
demonstrative, yeah.
So you don't use the noun, and
Uh-huh.
we have the not the most. Uh, how do you call it?
Demonstrative.
Demonstrative
Uh-huh.
adjectives. Adjectives.
Yes, yes.
We use the noun.
Exactly,
Okay.
because the adjective is describing the noun that we're talking about, right? So, for example, these flowers are very beautiful, right? These flowers are for my girlfriend. Both of them work really well in that case. So, yeah, pronoun, let me just write it down here, guys. It's going to be easier. right? So that's essentially the rule that we've looked at so far. Sometimes the examples, when we look at them in terms of speaking, it's not native speakers don't always make a very strong differentiation between adjectives and pronouns. Sometimes it actually just people when they speak they don't really pay too much attention to this stuff. But you know, it's something that because we're learning, it's something that we should know. So there's actually a few other categories that I think is interesting and something that we should know about, right? If we can use distributive, so these are no longer demonstratives. We are talking about a different topic now. Distributive pronouns are used to indicate, for example, how many people or how many members of a group are being affected by something, right? And we use distributive pronouns. Distributive pronouns, they're always going to be singular, right? And we use them, they are always also followed by singular verbs, okay? So for example, distributive pronouns, there are three examples that are actually very popular in English, right? We use each, either, and neither, right? So either and neither, right? These are distributive pronouns. They are always singular, and they are always followed by a singular verb. So, for example, I could say, each of you will receive a slice of pizza. Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. Each of you will receive a slice of pizza, right? So that is one example of how we use each, right? Another example is either of you could win the race, right? Either of you could win the race. Maybe you're talking to two people who are racing, right? Either of you could win the race, depending on the situation, depending on who practiced harder, right? And the other example, so for neither, we could say something like, neither of them studied for the exam, right? Neither of them studied for the exam. So these distributive pronouns are used to refer to persons or things, looking at them one at a time, right? So each one of you, or each of you, we're talking to maybe 700 people, right? Each of you will receive one slice of pizza, right? Either of them could become president, right? Maybe an election. It's a big election, two people. Either of them could win the election, right? Neither of those racers are playing fairly, right? Maybe they're both cheating or something like that. Neither of those racers are playing fairly, right? So that is how we use each, either, and neither, and these are distributive pronouns. So any questions about that, guys, first, before we move on?
No question.
Heidi's good. Sergio, go ahead if you have any questions.
No, it's okay.
It's okay? It's good for you?
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Fantastic. And then another one is, so when we talk about either and neither, right, we can use it, those are used to talk about, for example, two persons or two things, right? Either of them could win the race between two people. Neither of them are playing fair. We're talking about one or two people. Each, actually, honestly, each can be about as many people as you want, right? You can talk to a massive group. Each of you will receive $100, right? It doesn't have to be two people. But when we talk, if we want to talk about more than two persons or two people, or more than two things, then we can use, for example, all of them, for example. So all of, or none of, right? If you want to talk about everybody, all of. And so all of them are winners, right? Maybe at the end of a race, sometimes you see, especially if there are children, that parents say all of them are winners, right? And if you want to say nobody was a winner, none of them are winners, right? None of them will receive any money. None of them are honest. Maybe you're talking about politicians, right? all of them are corrupt, right? Talking about a large group of people. Any questions about that, guys? That's clear as well? Okay.
No question.
Alrighty, fantastic. And then the last couple examples that we have are if we are talking about something that always kind of has the same meaning, right? So each and every are two words that pretty much have the same meaning depending on how you use it, right? So each year I go to my grandmother's house for Christmas. Every year I go to my grandmother's house for Christmas. Really no difference. Each and every have really the same meaning in English, right? For example, each of you will receive money. You can say every one of you will receive money, or everyone will receive money, right? Really means the same thing. Really not a major difference when it comes to English. Um, there are specific things like individually, if you are talking about, for example, specific individuals, then you can use each, right? Each artist has a special talent for music, for example, right? If you're talking about a larger group, right? So, for example, every every person in the or every passenger in the plane buckled their seatbelts, right? We're talking about a larger group. So in this case, each and every have a difference because we're not talking about something that changes in meaning. We're talking about we're talking about an individual versus a group, right? Each artist has a different philosophy. Every passenger was ready for the trip, whatever, right? So each and every, it's during some instances they mean the same thing. Every year, each year, they mean the same thing. In other instances, they don't really mean the same thing. Depends on the context. This lesson is really very heavily focusing on the context. What do you want to describe, right? If you want to describe an individual, use each. If you want to use if you want to describe maybe a lot of people doing the same thing, then you should use every, right? So it's a little bit of a difference there, and practice makes perfect, especially when it comes to this scenario. So, any questions about that, guys?
No question.
No questions.
Sergio, you're good? Okay. Heidi, you're good as well. Okay, fantastic. What we're going to do, guys, is this lesson, really looking at it as an individual lesson is difficult. We need to be able to put some of these ideas into either an article or in terms of conversation, right? So in order to do that, let us take a look at the article that we are going to be reading today. And it's an interesting article, I think, primarily because it talks about a social issue in a country that is not really that well understood, right? A lot of people may not know a lot about Pakistan. Pakistan is in the news for a lot of bad reasons, but this article is really discussing a major social issue that we see in that country for a lot of young people. So if you guys can open up that link, that'll be fantastic. What I'm going to do here is actually I'm going to screen share so that you guys can see my screen and we can jump right to the article. So we're not going to read the whole thing because we're a little short on time, but it starts off with not the marrying kind, right? So this is a girl who is talking about her lifestyle growing up in Pakistan. By Pakistani standards, I'm fast approaching old maid status. My 25th birthday is less than a month away. As news of my age and single status has spread around our family circles, I've had the pleasure of suffering through a host of well-intentioned conversations surrounding my lifestyle. Over the Eid holidays, I saw a friend of my grandmother's for the first time in months. As I greeted her, she peered at me from behind her thick glasses. "Isn't it about time you let a man find you?" she asked. I nodded, while looking for an escape route, but she had already grasped my hands. "That's all I prayed for all Ramadan," the woman continued. for women like you to get married and have happy, healthy children, right? This girl is only 25, not even 25, and her aunt or somebody in her family, a friend of her grandmother's, is telling her that she should already be married, right? So let's start here, guys. My relationship status, or lack thereof, comes up almost every time I speak to the older women in my family. Just this week, my grandmother showed me a second cousin's wedding invitation. Do you know how old she is? My grandmother asked. Younger than even your brother, right? So she says, my younger brother is 22. I had to work hard, not to mention that I was far too busy studying to be thinking of marriage when I was his age. For my grandmother, a master's degree pales in comparison to the achievement of a good engagement, right? So for this grandmother, having an education, having a master's degree is ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything in comparison to, for example, getting engaged to a good husband, for example, right? Uh, so this right here, we're going to skip this part right here. We don't really need to know too much about this. I'm going to skip some of this stuff. Okay, so let's start at the end here. At a recent art gallery event, a single friend of mine was approached by an older woman she barely knew. I have the name of a great gynecologist, said the woman. The statement was confusing. There was no prelude, but the woman went on. I heard your 28th birthday is coming up, she said, her voice a stage whisper. This woman can really help you figure out if your ovaries are okay. Right? Stifling a laugh, my friend thanked the woman. I'll call you for the contact, she said, a response more genial than the one I would have given. Right? So we see this is a situation with a lot of young women, right? Based on this article, it's really an interesting kind of commentary, right? It's not a news article, but it's a young girl who is writing about the trouble that she faces in her society. 25 years old, however, for her family, for her grandmother, she should already be married, right? And this other woman, 28, some strange woman comes up to her and asks her if her ovaries are okay. I mean, asks her if she wants to know the phone number of a doctor, right? Kind of bizarre. I mean, when we look at the situation. Sergio, what do you think about this article? I mean, the fact that we have women that are being pressured into these situations by their society. Sergio, I think your mic is off. Unfortunately, I can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, fantastic.
I think it's sad for women in this situation to be to be forced to engage. So because women as men we can do many things, not only be husbands or mother or father. So I feel sorry for them.
Mm-hmm. And Sergio, do you think each of these women have specific challenges? I mean, do you think some of them face family pressure because of age? Maybe others face family pressure because of education? I mean, could there be more than one reason as to why each of these women have different problems?
I suppose mainly education, social, maybe economic pressure, or yes, maybe they are rich families and they want to engage their daughters with rich men. I don't know. Social pressures. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Heidi, what do you think about this? I mean, do you think it's something that, I mean, what's your reaction to the article, first of all?
Yeah, less than 10 years ago, Japan was like that situation. Women were so called Christmas cake. The people compared the women to Christmas cake because
Christmas cake, uh-huh.
yeah, until 24th, they should sell all Christmas cake. After that, Christmas cake will be discounted every day, discounted.
So that magical age was age 24, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. And it seems identical here actually in Pakistan because we start the article and the woman is saying that she's not even 25, but that's already old woman status for her
Yeah.
in her society, right? So
Yeah.
what was the reason behind the change, Heidi? I mean, what happened between, 10 years ago and now?
People thought women is the thing to give birth. So most important thing is giving birth, new generation.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they had a very good education, but people think women as a kind of tool to give birth
Mm-hmm.
next generation.
Just a factory for babies.
Yes, that's right.
Right? Which is sad. I mean, Sergio, is this something that happens in Mexico as well? I mean, is there pressure? Do girls face this kind of pressure in some societies?
As Heidi said, in Mexico also uh, 10, 15 years ago was like that. But now, because we women have to work, so women are more more independent.
Mm-hmm.
So now things are different. Still, and let's say in the big cities things are changing, but in the small cities, in the countryside, things
Mm-hmm.
are like this article.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, I mean, I think this article does a good job by saying that, each of these women, have their own specific challenges. So for some of them, it could be family pressure, economical pressure, maybe educational, right? All of these things may keep women from marrying. I mean, is it the same thing? So I think, Sergio, you touched on this a little bit. In Mexico, what keeps a young woman from marrying when she's 24 maybe? I mean, what other pressures or what other reasons could they have for marrying late?
For marrying late,
Yeah, in terms of marrying when they're 28, 29, 30. I mean, what could force a woman to wait for 6 years or 5 more years? I think you said work, right? Work was one.
yes, work.
Uh-huh.
They mm, mm, start. Some women they like to study a lot. They go to university to make PhDs, or they want to be professors at the university or college. So
Mm-hmm.
they want to study. They want to work. Or basically, I think these are the two main reasons the women wait, or they don't like, they want to be independent because in Mexico, still mm, many we are still very how do you call it, a very society in which man has a lot of power. Men has a lot of
At a patriarchal society, right?
power. Okay, a pa-
Patriarchal.
patriarchal
Patriarchal, uh-huh.
patriarchal society. So women that who are independent, they are afraid that their independence can be, I'd say, stolen or
Yeah, it can be lost, right? Maybe they'll
yeah.
lose their independence, right? And so, I mean, this is something that I think is actually very common, right? So when we look at patriarchal societies in general, I think Pakistan can also be considered that kind of a society. I'm sorry, Sergio, I didn't hear the last part. I think your mic was off. Oh, okay. No worries. Okay, so Heidi, I mean, a quick question for you, and then I'm going to ask Sergio afterwards. I mean, for example, do you think everybody in society is hostile to these women who marry late? Or is it just some people? Is it the majority of them? I mean, what do you think?
Nowadays, they don't think about women's age because even women will be promoted. But until several years ago, women hardly have been promoted. So their future would be miserable if they are single, getting older,
Mm-hmm.
but their wage is the same as young women.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, for example, 10, 15 years ago, in like in Japanese society, was society as a whole opposed to women who married later on, or who refused to marry? Or, I mean, were there social movements and, feminists and people who were trying very hard to change that situation? I mean,
Yeah, that's right. Around 10 years ago, women wanted to be single for their life. In that case, it was very difficult. Other people criticized. Maybe that woman had some problem.
hmm hmm
They thought so.
which is very, I mean, it's very rude. It's very sad, right? To
Yeah.
to categorize a woman like that. I mean,
Mm.
and would it be, I mean, do you think that Japan is a patriarchal society as well?
Pardon?
Do you think Japan is a patriarchal society, like we heard from
Yeah, still
Sergio?
now. Yeah, I
It
think
still
so.
is.
Almost politicians and ministers are men, and even CEO of companies are men.
Wow. So if a girl, let's say, somebody in Japan is like 24 years old,
Mm.
last day of the Christmas cake, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is their I guess their main way of how do they survive that hostile society? Do some girls just face the pressure and get married to whatever guy, or do they just wait and see how their family reacts? I mean, what happens?
So now maybe it's a process to moving some that situation. Women got educated a lot, maybe better than men. Women
hmm
work harder than men, maybe
hmm
double. And while they are students in university, they studied a lot. So their score is much better than the men. But
hmm
still, men can get good job, better job than women.
Just because they're men, they get better jobs.
Yes.
Really, I didn't think Japan was like that.
But the situation is changing now.
It's changing. Okay.
Maybe in next decade it will be changed.
hmm
I hope.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. I mean, Sergio, I mean, what do young Mexican women, let's say they are 24, 25, right? Is there an age that they, I mean, how do they cope? Do you know how they deal with this patriarchal society with maybe in the countryside more, right? Do you think some women just get married? They just get married to whoever because they can't stand the pressure anymore?
Yes, definitely. In the countryside, yes, they married with whoever appears. The last one, yeah, because they can stand the pressure.
hmm
Because in the small towns, you don't have many options. Uh, so I think in countryside, it's very difficult for independent women. And the city is totally different. Women, they get along very well with their jobs, their studies, their family. Yeah.
hmm
As Heidi said, things are changing slowly, but changing here in
hmm
Mexico.
hmm Absolutely. And I think, I mean, the one thing that I like to, I mean, there's some follow up to this too, right? So if a woman chooses to just marry whoever, like let's say in the countryside, right? I mean, I think that relationship doomed to fail if this was forced on them from the beginning and they just happen to marry whoever. What do you think about that, Sergio?
Yeah, for sure. But but I think that for sure that's one of the reasons there are a lot of unhappy marriages. Here, still in the countryside, it's very patriarchal. So yeah,
hmm
many things are, let's say, small towns rearranged. People they marry between families. So
hmm
I think many of these marriages are, are failed marriages, but they don't divorce, they do anything. They live their lives without love, but you know, they function as a marriage, but that's all.
That's very interesting. I was going to ask you if the divorce rate in the countryside is high, but it seems like it's not, right?
It's not in the city is very high,
Uh,
but in the countryside we have two Mexicos: Mexico countryside, very backwards; Mexico modern city, Mexico City, and very
mhm.
very advanced. But yeah,
Yeah, I think if I may assume, I think Sergio, maybe the reason behind very low divorce rates in the countryside or almost no divorces in the countryside is because of the religious aspect of it, right?
Yeah, you're right. We are a very Catholic country, so yes, Catholicism is very strong here in my country, and priests are seen like a senior figures in the small towns. The most respectable figure still in the countryside is the priest.
Hmm. Definitely not that case in the city, though, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, no, no.
Do people in the cities attend church regularly?
No, not as no, no,
Okay,
no,
that's
no.
interesting. Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned how there are two Mexicos. Many industrial societies or, new democracies, up and coming, developing countries are in that same scenario. Bless you, Heidi. Uh, they're in the same scenario because, for example, I think you can say the same thing about Pakistan. Maybe there is a countryside Pakistan is even worse. I mean, if we read the newspapers and we hear about all of the there was a girl named Malia. I don't know if you guys heard about her. She wanted to learn, and she wanted to go to school. She wanted an education, and the militants in Pakistan, many of these terrorists, they decided to shoot her actually because she wanted to learn, because she wanted to go to school, and she survived, and she was taken to I think the UK, and then she came back to Pakistan, and now she's a hero because of she nearly lost her life because she wanted an education, and that is, we're talking about countryside Pakistan, extremely rural, very backward. Religion is very important for them. It's a very strong Islamic religion, in that area. So lots of similarities. What about Heidi? I wanted to ask you kind of the same thing that we were talking about with Sergio. Is divorce something that happens in Japan? Is there a difference between more traditional areas of the country versus the more modern areas of the country?
Yes,
Or
many young people are divorced. They are
really,
very single, but they have already kids.
really?
Yeah.
And is it because of the same reasons? Because maybe failed marriages or not good compatibility, right?
The government distribute some allowance for single women who have kids, so they can live on that budget enough. And
Hmm.
if they have some part-time job, they can live it enough, very good life.
Really? So they can actually
Yeah.
live comfortably?
Yeah. So they decided to divorce.
Oh wow! And what do all these men that are divorced from their wives? What do they do?
Yeah, that case is very sad. So many men who divorce and they have kids, let's say, complained about that system.
Hmm. Are there any plans to change the system, maybe for divorced women?
Yeah, maybe it will be changed. It's unfair. So
Yeah, it's unfair for the men, right? That's
yeah,
one
yeah,
one example where something is unfair for the men.
yeah. Because men were like richer than women in the past because they got better salary compared to women.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
people consider men are rich normally. Mm.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, guys, when we talk about these situations, I guess we, using the demonstrative pronouns and demonstrative adjectives, we could have used phrases like these women, these Pakistani women or these women are facing difficulties in their Pakistani societies. What's another example, Sergio? Let me ask you, would it be possible to use, for example, all of or none of? Could you give me an example with all of or none of using something from this article? Just a quick practice. I know we were looking at grammar. Sergio, I think your mic is off once again. I'm sorry to disturb you.
All of
Uh-huh.
these
Okay.
all of these women want to marry want to marry and be happy.
All of these women want to be married and be happy. Fantastic. Great. Yeah, that's a great sentence, right? We're using this concept. Very well done. And Heidi, what about you? Can you make a sentence with none of? Just to
Oh,
practice none of?
none of
Yeah.
none of these men who none of these divorced men who have kids can get the allowance from government.
Can get the allowance from the government. Uh-huh. Fantastic. I had no idea that this allowance was even something that exists in Japan. It's very intriguing for me. It's awesome. I think it's a good system. It keeps men loyal to their wives, I think. You know. So anyway, guys, unfortunately, we do have to end this class now because I have another class that's starting right now. It's going to be about a new invention called, I believe it's called the germ fighter or something like that. It's called the germ falcon. The germ falcon. It's a new, brand new invention. So if you guys want to join me in that class, you guys are more than welcome. If we have the full hour, then we can definitely talk a lot more and learn a lot more. But Sergio, it's great to meet you. You know, I hope I can see you in another class soon.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
And Heidi, of course, I'm sure I'll see you again.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, guys, take care. Have a good one. Class is starting again now. If you guys want.
Bye bye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.